Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
Steve Baxi.
Indeed. Today we're discussing a comic book that I picked, which is quite a revelation here in Geeky Gentlemen in this day and age. Because Steve told me, hey Ian, pick a comic since you're always complaining about you don't have time to read comics unless it's for the show. So I did.
It's true. It's exactly how that conversation happened.
Yep, and this is going to be a review of the first 2 volumes of Animosity, which is a series written by Margaret Bennett and with art by Rafael de la Torre. I think I got most of that right. And this is from Aftershock Entertainment, which Steve was telling me has been going through some financial trouble, so that's sad to hear.
Yeah, we can go into that.
But the basic premise of Animosity was not something I knew going into this, so I want to spend just a few minutes talking about the book without revealing anything about the plot, because I think one of the things that's very enjoyable about this is just how surprising the premise ends up being. So I guess in just broad strokes, I'll say this isn't like my favorite thing ever, even though Bennett is one of my top 10 comic writers for Bombshells and some of her other stuff. This certainly isn't, like, I think even like the top of her quality, but it's still really good quality because it's her doing it, in my opinion. And you just get some really great character development and stories, and just... I just love the things that she does where characters will just have a really fucking deep conversation throughout like an entire issue. And I always appreciate that. Some good surprise moments here and there, and just a really, like, the premise is just so balls to the wall that I don't want anyone to know it. But I just want, like, if you just want, and it's not like, oh, you know, you'll figure out the premise by like the end of the first volume. No. You'll figure out the premise by the, like, 3rd page, but it's so good that I just kind of want people to vibe on the surprise of that page turn kind of moment. How about you, Steve? What are your, like, general thoughts on Animosity?
I thought this was okay. I enjoyed it. It didn't rock my world or anything. You're right when you get to the premise, and as the book evolves, the characters you start to identify with and how their dynamics work is all really entertaining and all really refreshing. It reminded me a lot of the first issue especially, but just how the book sort of progresses narratively. It reminded me a lot of Y the Last Man. And a lot of creator-owned comics always cite the first issue of Y the Last Man as, like, up there as one of the best first issues in comics of all time. And you can totally see that kind of influence going into, like, oh, this is Y the Last Man, except for this premise. So that was interesting to watch unfold. I have 2 problems with it that like consistently distracted me from it, that kind of just compound the more you read it. The first is, whoever the colorist is, they flatten the artwork so hard, and it makes lines that are normally pretty good or well executed look like just generic bargain bin how to draw comics cover art, which just does not work for this, because it is definitely a book where everything requires the characters to be very expressive or aware of how they're presenting themselves. And so, like, the artist is doing a really good job making the acting happen, but the coloring is just bad. It's flat, it's bland, it's lifeless. There's no work being done in the coloring that complements the way the art is working, and it's a shame. The other thing is, this reads way too fast. There's a clear pacing issue where I feel like issue 4 and issue 8 read like regular comics. They read like a book that will take you a good 10 to 20 minutes to kind of go through, and there's a lot of dialogue, and it's paced very well. But issues 1 to 3 and then issues 5 to 7, where the bulk of the arc happen, feel like they're just one issue stretched over 3. And it's not like what's happening isn't entertaining. It just moves way, way too fast. There's a lot of stuff, particularly in issue 1 and 2, where they do time jumps, where I'm like, no, go back. This was interesting. What the fuck do you mean I don't get anything but this one panel to explain this idea?
I think that's fair. And it's one of those things where creator-owned stuff like this, or creator-run stuff like this, kind of requires not wasting time on setting up and not really necessarily getting the luxury to stretch things out as much, because if sales drop, then you can't continue the book, kind of thing. Which, I don't know, I find it interesting because this did well enough that she was able to spin it out into at least an additional ongoing series, if not like 3. Because there's, in the end of Volume 1, you get Animosity The Rise, and then I think there was another...
Animosity Evolution. So, like, The Rise is a miniseries that came out concurrent with the original series, and then Evolution either takes place after the main series, or is another ongoing that gets caught up after Rise.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, I noticed that kind of going into it. I'm like, wow, this was much more of a success for her than I was aware of. I'd seen it talked about with her, and like, you know, I'd seen it mentioned quite a bit, but I just was unaware of like having that much of a runaway success to be able to do, you know, your spin-offs and stuff. That's kind of crazy. Again, for creator-owned books, that's more rare than I'm used to. But so you've gotten your critiques out, but do you think it is worth just at least Volume 1? Go out and just read Volume 1, just for the fucking premise and page turn kind of moment.
Yeah, it's entertaining for sure. I read both volumes in like an hour and a half. Like, I was just burning through them. I didn't expect to go through the whole thing in one day, but it was really entertaining. Bits of it are really, really funny. Volume 1 has a Pokemon joke that I love that kind of comes back later. That was really, really cute. And the main character, not the main character that you'd expect looking at the cover, but the actual main character of the series, once you get the premise, is really, really interesting. And I love the voice that she has for him specifically, because he's taking on... Well, okay, I don't want to spoil it. I like the way he's written, and we can talk in more detail after. Sounds
good. All right, so our recommendation is go read Animosity, at least Volume 1, because it's quite a blast. All right, so if that's it, you're done. You've got everything. You've never heard of this book. You maybe want to be enticed and surprised. There you go. We're moving into spoilers now. Holy shit, man. Fucking animal zombie apocalypse. Like, I
love that, like, literally page 3 and the rats attack.
Yep.
Like, wait, what the fuck?
Like, Bennett is such a good horror writer and understands, like, the timing of horror in comics to a fucking T, because the page turns on some of these moments just hit so hard, and the fact that issue 1 just literally, you're like, okay, here's the slow build up to whatever's happening, and then no, it is not a slow build, it just instantly happens, and you think, oh, maybe now it's like a flashback. No, it is not a flashback. Shit just starts going from there, and it is such like a just grab you and pull you along kind of premise. But yeah, so if you weren't convinced to read it without the premise explained, here it is. What if one day every single animal, fish, bird, insect, everything that's alive on the planet that is not a human gained human level sentience and realized what humanity has done to them and just said, fuck you.
And it's interesting too, because like the title is Animosity and the focus is on the people and the animals. But there are certain cutaway gags and just dialogues that happen in later issues where like, okay, what if though, right? You're saying human level sentience for all creatures. But what about creatures whose vocal cords did not evolve for speech? How are they suddenly talking? Or like the conversation between the two fish in the ocean who are like, what about all the bacteria that we feed on? Are they alive now? What's going on there?
Yep, and like you just don't know. There's no way to tell because their voices are too quiet. Yeah, no, it's absolutely fucking fascinating, and just I don't know, some of the panels and jokes just like they get that perfect level of like dark humor you can only really do in a horror premised thing. So I really liked the fucking polar bear kills, I think it's a seal or something or penguin, and it's like, what have I done? Like that's really good. And then you got like
the fucking bird who's pretending to be a dragon, like it's meant to be scary, but it's just so funny.
There's that, and then there's like the like little finch or whatever is like, I guess I was just caught up in being a mother because I thought I had to, but I'm not sure I'm ready to have kids. And she's just looking at the egg like, holy shit, it's so good. Yeah. So there's a lot of like really good comedy, but then it's like spliced together with some like legitimately this is terrifying shit going down, and then just like that, like I don't know how else to describe it besides just big brain level thinking of you tweak one thing about the world and you just like go through what the fuck would happen, you know? Like that's just I love the premise. Like, you know what this feels like to me, Steve?
What?
This feels like one of those conversations you have with people at work when it's like a slow day and everyone's just kind of like trying to get through it, and someone just says, yo, what if, and like it's this, you know, like this is just the result of that conversation. What if all animals could suddenly talk and think on the same level we do? Well, they'd be pissed. And like I like that it's not just the like the cattle and they talk about like the meat industry and stuff. Like that's a huge portion of this book. But like it's a bit deeper than that, because then there's just like the idea of jealousy, and I like that two of the animal characters just have a conversation of, it's not that everyone wants to be equal, it's that everyone wants to be living the life that humans lived before the wake, where, you know, they have a house and air conditioning and a game controller, but the game controller is made for hooves instead of fingers. Like, yeah, fucking...
Well, it's interesting because you get like these conversations and you get like these compromises in the first couple issues where what would happen if you did give sentience and quote unquote human rights to all living creatures, and then that one human brings up the idea of like, what about animals controlling their population? Like, whether or not you condone hunting is a legitimate way to curb overpopulation in deers. Like, that's a legit thing. Or like cows who do actually need humans or someone else to milk them so that they don't get backed up. Like, how do you balance that out with the idea that they are now also sentient beings at the same time? And if you're going to make the animals curve their reproduction, then you got to make the humans do it too. And like, what does that look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's just the level of thought into the way this just changes society is really fascinating. But then there's like an undercurrent to it in the way that this is used to comment on just, I don't know if Western ideas of society or just maybe the term I'm looking for that like better describes it is the disparity between wealth within the modern world. And like not just in the sense of like the 1% versus the 99, but in the sense that like if you make more than $1 a day on like the grand scale of the human population, you are rich. Which is, you know, like bizarre to think about, that someone who's struggling to, you know, even afford to put food on the table, much less pay their rent or whatever, someone that's living paycheck to paycheck is conceptually richer than people that live in other parts of the world. But like it kind of trickles down and like takes that to a absurdist scale by comparing it to animals. I don't know, I found that to be a really fascinating way to kind of comment on and just look at that disparity from a very different lens.
And also to like create a problem for this idea of what exactly is natural, right? Like what is there's a sort of oversimplified idea, even if you're someone who is pro animal rights, is a vegetarian, vegan, or whatever. There's sort of this simplified idea that like man has fucked with nature and they have done it too much and it's bad and we should stop doing it. And their appeal to that is things like, because of capitalism and human overreach, certain quote-unquote natural populations or natural places like forests are being burned down or destroyed, and that is 100% correct. But you do have to kind of stop and think about like what exactly counts as natural. Like an example that I always love bringing up is the Native Americans in America before European colonizers came over basically hunted the buffalo into extinction. Then the colonizers came over, killed a bunch of the Indians, and the buffalo was able to come back. On those terms, what exactly is the natural population of buffalo, right?
You're missing a third part to that story that's very important.
Okay.
And then Western American settlers began to move across the country
and then kill more buffalo.
The buffalo.
Yeah, no, but it's one of those things where like these things oscillate. It's not like nature and humanity are independent opposing forces. It's that they co-constitute each other, and everything that grows is also taking away from everything we can do, and vice versa. There's definitely a disproportionate level of how much we destroy nature versus how much we utilize it, but there is also an important conversation to be had. Like, it's not as simple as what PETA makes it out to be, of like animals are basically human. And when you say things like, oh, my dog is my family, like what does that actually mean? To what extent are you willing to grant humanity to your dog in a real way as opposed to just saying it?
Mm-hmm. And I like the way that like the different levels of relationships that humans have to animals is explored here. And I mean, it's right there on page 1, right? Where you have the veterinarian talking to the exterminator that he brought in to his clinic to deal with a rat infestation, right? And he's like, I don't get you, Doc. You're saving mice 1 minute and then you're killing rats the next. Is it just because one's smaller and cuter? He goes, well, no, I actually do treat rats too, but they have to be, you know, pets and tame, and these aren't, and they're moving in where they're really not wanted, so now they're causing a problem. And die rat bastard, die rat bastard. Like it's right there from page 1 of the juxtaposition of humans' relationships to animals and where we allow them to exist in our lives. Because you have a really interesting discussion of pets where you have the main character of the series, Sandor, and his girl, Jessie, and that is, I think, the way that every pet owner wants to picture what their relationship with their pet would be should this incident occur in real life, where the very first thing the pet says when it has the opportunity is, I love you. Whereas, so you have that, but then you have, I don't know if we have a direct thing that's on the same level of a domesticated animal, but like immediately in that same issue, you have another animal that was being kept as a pet, and its first reaction is to kill its owner, and that was the tiger being kept in the building across the street. And that's just like fascinating. Is there are animals that we keep in their home, and we think we love them and show them affection and take care of them, but how the fuck do they feel about it? Would they want that given the opportunity? Like, do they run away because they don't know any better, or do they run away because they are trying to escape? Do they lash out at you because it's instinct, or do they lash out at you because they don't like you? These are all really fascinating questions.
And so to kind of bring it back to what I was saying earlier, and that's also kind of my problem with this book, which is there's a lot of really interesting questions, and there's a lot of like one bits or like single pages that just kind of introduce an idea. But I feel like the early parts of this book move so fast past this stuff that we never really get a chance to kind of stop and stay in this particular context. Like, there's definitely a level of like this book wants to get to a certain status quo, and that status quo is the one that we see for a majority of the second volume. When we have like the Animilitary and we have the girl and the dog moving across the country trying to get to California.
Kill the fucking hostages!
So like they're trying to do that. They're, like I said earlier, they're trying to do Why the Last Man, and Why the Last Man is all the men in the world die except one guy and his pet monkey. And by the end of the first issue, he basically is trying to get from point A to point B. And a lot of this series in structure feels like it's trying to borrow the setup from Why the Last Man, which makes sense because it was a really successful creator-owned comic. The problem I have is I feel like the second arc is that get to where you're going setup, and we spend one whole arc trying to get there in a manner that I feel like is kind of truncated, but also at the same time it takes too long because it takes 4 issues to get us to the real status quo. And so that feels like it's too much, and you could have just condensed it into one issue like so many other books would have. But then at the same time, every issue is really, really interesting, and I want to stay in each of the status quos before we get there, because all of that stuff I find way more entertaining. Like, it's one thing to have the whole, now the animals attack, and it's like a zombie apocalypse except animals are attacking. Okay, that's cool, and that's interesting. And then immediately it's like, oh, now the animals are negotiating with the people, and they're trying to figure out what the animal Bill of Rights is. I'm like, wait, hang on, I want to go back to this. This sounds really interesting. And they just keep glossing over it really, really quickly. And it's not that the questions aren't interesting in and of themselves, but I wish the book took the time to kind of stop and explore them, or at the very least have like more full conversations about how the animals and the main characters feel about it. You get that a little bit more with issue 8 when they're all talking about their ideas of God and religion, which is really cool. But I wish if you were going to have so many jumps in time, that each issue took more of a self-contained approach, and you just said, for issue 1, we are at this point in the wake. In issue 2, we are at this point in the wake. In issue 3, we are at this point in the wake. Instead of trying to just kind of rush to Act 2, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because issue 1, does that end with the 1 year later thing, or am I misremembering? Or is that issue 2? Issue 2 ends with the 1 year later, right?
Issue 1 basically just ends with the image of the girl and the dog. I don't remember how much they end up
issue 2.
There. Okay.
Issue 1 is just like literally the first day of the wake, and then issue 2 is where you start getting all those time jumps, where it's like 1 month after the wake, 1 year is where it ends. And that's like when they start to leave New York, and then you run into like the Animilitary and stuff. Animilitary, so fucking funny.
That's so funny, man. So issue 2, like you start off with like 1 week later, and then you've got 1 year later, a month later, like it just keeps jumping. But every context you're in, I'm like, this is interesting. Please stay here. How did we get from zombie apocalypse New York with people looking at their cell phones at pictures of loved ones they'll never see again to the next month there's just everyone hanging out at a park where animals are like trying to sell their services? What happened here?
I mean, I think that's interesting, and I kind of, I don't know, I see where you're coming from, where, I kind of wanted the fucking... okay, Did you read the last issue backup thing we were talking about? The World
The
of
Rise?
Animosity? No, the
Oh
World
no,
of
the other one,
Animosity.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I skimmed through it, yeah.
Okay. I'm so frustrated that we got all this, here's what's going on in fucking Zamzia, instead of here's what the proposed Animal Bill of Rights was. Like that's the fucking document I wanted to read
Yeah.
about.
How does this work? Someone explain.
Yeah. But like, so on one hand, I do agree that shit's really interesting, and I kind of wish we could stick with it. On another hand, I do think that's probably the best way to handle it is what was done. Because by teasing the really interesting idea and showing that it's still too early, things are too chaotic for that to work right now, and just focusing in on the, ground level, this character is not important to what is going on in the world. This is just a character that we are going to experience this world from. And so you're kind of like, it might be really fascinating to know what's going on in the world, but like if you're just the fucking guy during World War II, you don't really have any say of it. You don't get to be involved in it. You just get to like passively hear about the developments that are happening. And that's kind of the vibe I really enjoyed with this. Is just, yeah, it's really fascinating. There's undeniable, and it's kind of just hooking you and showing you the depth of potential and interest that this story carries, but at the same time, that is not the story itself. The story is the characters in this world living through it, as opposed to the like fucking overview, introduction to the entire planet kind of thing.
Well, and that's why when you get to like the anti-military and stuff, the book kind of opens up more, because by that point you are actually expressing those ideas through the avatar of a character we're getting to know. So like the wolf dude who wants the dog's help in like tracking his girlfriend that was captured by the humans, and they're doing the prisoner exchange. Like that, when you get to that issue and the betrayal and everything, that's allowing you to have space to be like, okay, this is what this person believes should be happening in this world, and here is their conflict with another group that believes something else. And doing all of that is definitely more worth it. My thing is just like a lot of the more interesting broad questions about like what this series is about kind of get, at least in the early issues, kind of just get left hanging. And so if that was going to happen, I would have preferred then to just truncate all of issue 1 through 3 into one issue and then jump right into it like Why the Last Man does. Or if you were intent on separating them out into 3 separate issues with all those time jumps, then maybe spend more time making each issue feel like a full issue. And that's the other part of this, where it feels like, with the exception of issue 4 and issue 8, this book just reads way too fast. It reads so uncontrollably fast. Like there's no sense of like control on the letter part to keep you hanging in one status quo or one character's mind for very long. You're just burning through pages. It reads a little bit like Warren Ellis on Iron Man Extremis, where like that's a 6 issue or a 4 or 6 issue mini. And you could read the whole thing in fucking 30 minutes. That's kind of how the first 3 and the next 3 issues feel. And I don't love that. I don't love that, like, if you're going to pack all of these ideas in, then you can't make the issue read like a clip show.
I think that's a fair enough criticism. Again, I think another part of that is, with a creator-owned book, you do kind of have to be more aware of getting the ball rolling, getting to the point of the story a lot faster, and you don't necessarily get the luxury of time to kind of live in things for as long as you might like. You kind of, by necessity of having to hook your audience, you, especially in early days of a creator-owned book, you have to be kind of nailing things, boom, 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 to keep interest up.
But I think you're kind of arguing against yourself by saying that, right? Because with creator-owned books, you don't really see money until like issues 5 and 6. And so the idea behind a lot of successful creator-owned books is that every issue should feel like it's something that is big and contained enough that it warrants people coming back for the next. If your whole first arc is the pitch, then the creator-owned side of it isn't working, because you're requiring or hoping that the person keeps up with the book for 4 issues, instead of trying to make each individual issue its own event. And with Aftershock, and we can talk about some of the Aftershock stuff, Aftershock's not a true creator-owned the same way something like Image is, where like Image is, you basically have the Image logo and the Image printers, and everything else is like a small business. If you want an editor, you pay for an editor. You hire letterers, you hire artists, you manage all of it, and you make your own company, and it all just comes out under the banner of Image. Image will sometimes, if you're big enough, give you a grant to do some of that, but you're all on your own, which is why that stuff can cost you so much more. Other studios like Boom and Aftershock have more of like a 50-50 split, where like they have an established company, and they will pay you enough forward so you can produce a book to a certain degree, so there's less risk for you, but there's also less control for you after a certain point. So like with Boom, I think they get like, you don't get 100% of the rights to whatever book you put out there. And so Aftershock is similar. And Aftershock went bankrupt recently, and they're into something like $20 million in debt or something like that. And this stems from like months and months and months where they just were not paying their creators. Entire books fell apart because Aftershock was not paying people for the work they put in. And so it sort of represents this thing where Aftershock is actually giving you a cushion. It's at the time when this book was coming out in like 2016, there was enough of a cushion where like you didn't have to worry about this book getting canceled 2 issues in because no one bought it, because you had that backing in a way you wouldn't with Image. If it was something at Image, then the book would have had to do a lot more work issue to issue to make it feel like it was getting someone to buy issue 1 and then come back for issue 2. And so like when you say like the creator-owned side of it is why the issues are written this way, I feel like it's the opposite. I feel like if they were approaching this from like a true creator-owned mentality, then they probably would have been denser issues. They wouldn't have just been like, oh, don't worry, I have several issues, so we can stretch this out.
See, I don't know. I felt like it wasn't stretched out. I felt like it was just trying to get things moving and keep things surprising, because I mean, I think each issue in that first volume kind of ends on a pretty decent cliffhanger, or at least a decent draw for the next one. You know, you got, here's the fucking wacky, crazy, oh my god, I can't believe this happened premise. And now we've got our main characters together, and so if you want to know what's going to happen to them, you got to read issue 2. Issue 2, here's all the developments that are happening in this world as we just jump through the early days of this, and then suddenly we're a year later and they're leaving New York. And that's, you know, okay, so the ball's rolling there, things are developing, you've got major developments happening, and there's a good pace and just, again, interesting exploration of the world. Issue 3 is you get the Animilitary, and you get that big cliffhanger moment of kill the fucking hostages, which just set me for a loop. And then issue 4 is when you got things got a bit deeper, and that's when it finally felt like it took a second to just breathe as things kind of developed. And then I don't know if I agree with you as much on book 2, the second volume, The Dragon, reading quite as fast, but maybe it is just because that final issue does read a whole lot slower than the rest of it.
Yeah, the final issue feels like it takes twice as long to read compared to the other issues, which I mean that's what I feel like a normal comic should read at. Like, you're
That's
paying
fine.
like $5 for an issue, it should take you like 20 minutes to go through.
Oh, so you're one of those people that really hate when you get an issue that's just pure art, and then you're like, oh, this fucking goddamn it.
No, I like it if it's just pure art, but then like the art's got to be really good too, right? Like Tom
There's
King's
a balance.
Yeah, like Tom King's Batman run, every issue read very, very quickly, but that book was designed to be really rhythmic. So like you were reading it fast because it was designed to be read fast, and the dialogue was so poetic that every line naturally fed you into the next line, and you were repeating yourself a lot. So there was kind of a rhythm to it. And with Batman, you know you're getting Batman stories forever. So it's not like there's ever a run of like, if this Batman issue doesn't get picked up this week, it'll get picked up next week. And they were coming out every 2 weeks at that point. So like you can strike a balance of like an issue reading very fast based on the format the book is coming out on, versus other times where it just feels like too many things are happening too quickly for me to get an appreciation of the specific setting of each one. But yeah, by the time you get to the Animilitary, all of that stuff is really, really interesting. I love the dynamic between the dog and the wolf. And there is the magic trick of this book that it has to pull off every time is that you can't see what's the dog's name? Sandor? Yeah. You can't see him as a dog. You do legitimately have to see him as his own character. You have to empathize with him to the degree that like Disney animated movies make you care about cars. And I think she really pulls that off. He feels like a genuine character.
I think he's absolutely fantastic, and it's just no other animal you could believe it as hard as, no, this girl picked this dog when he was the runt of the litter puppy, and now he's literally going to go to the ends of the earth to save her. And I just thought that was absolutely fantastic.
And that he's also got like an accent the same way his family does. Like, I love that. Like, he really feels alive in that way.
For sure. And he's just, again, like, it is kind of funny because you and I have talked about this a little bit, where I don't really dig post-apocalyptic stuff, and also it like kind of bleeds over into a large majority of action-oriented things, because a lot of the post-apocalyptic and a lot of the action stuff basically just come down to person with gun, and that just instantly bores me to tears. I don't give a shit about James Bond being able to shoot 1 billion people in the head. You know, I don't care. Same with fucking John Wick. I said it.
Have you watched the John Wick movies? I didn't realize you did.
No, because I don't give a shit. Because it's just a guy with a gun. It's always the same fucking shit.
Well, no. You should watch John Wick before you say that, because that's not what it is. But okay.
That's what it's marketed as. It's a guy with a gun and a bulletproof suit. That's all I see.
You should watch that movie before you make that opinion. Is all I'm gonna say.
No, fuck it. It's bad. It's bad, and you should feel bad for liking it. Guns are a problem in this country, and I don't like that John Wick glorifies them.
Damn.
What's some more Twitter takes I could throw out there? But no, I just, from what it's marketed as, I've just never given a shit. And same for a lot of like post-apocalyptic zombie stuff. I do not care about people hold it up and just shooting fucking zombies in the head. Zombies have become the most like cannon fodder thing, to the point where any sense of, this was my friend and now I have to kill him, it's completely gone. I don't think anyone could legitimately be in like an actual zombie apocalypse and not think, my friend got bit, I can't do it, I can't kill him. I think everyone is now desensitized enough that they are ready to shoot their mom in the face if she becomes a zombie.
Yeah, no fuck zombie apocalypse fiction. I really don't like that either.
Yeah, and so you get this, which is, it's all the same markings. Society has collapsed. The characters are on their own, trekking across the world and the wilderness and dealing with dangerous situations. It's all there. All the hallmarks of your post-apocalyptic fiction. But just the premise of it keeps it fascinating enough that, like, anytime you're kind of going into trope territory, you're just, like, instantly rehooked on some shit that's just really cool and fascinating to think about the implications within the world. And you're also just left with these really great character dynamics that both feel like based on your kind of tropes from other post-apocalyptic fiction, but also are fresh and unique, because it's not like The Last of Us, where it's like, okay, here's the female character and here's the male character that feels the need to take care of them. No, that's there, but also it's her dog. Like, there's just, it puts a very different like flavor on it.
It does, and it part of that is also just when you have like those little like lone wolf cub stories. There is this kind of safety in like the person looking after you is older, is wiser, is understands and knows the world, and so the danger for them is that they'll lose you because you're vulnerable. But there's not really any danger for you because the person protecting you is sort of is meant to be like the epitome of what you should grow up to be. Versus this, where you have like that really good moment in issue, I want to say it was 5 or 6, where she gets her period, and at that point you have the dog really wrestle with the fact that dogs don't live as long as human beings. This dog's 11 years old, and that he can't do anything for her that a normal parent would because he's not one. He's not like it's not like he can teach her math. It's not like he understands how to read things. The limitations of physically being a dog mean that whatever she needs, he is at a certain point going to be completely incapable of giving it to her. And their relationship from the very beginning has a ticking clock because he is probably going to die soon, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I liked that a lot, the way that works. How am I supposed to give her a quinceañera and a bar mitzvah?
That was so funny.
It took me a minute because I was like, for a minute I thought it was just a joke of like he doesn't understand what those things are. And I'm like, oh no, wait, that's right. She is also Jewish and Hispanic in this, so like, legitimately that's a problem for it. I thought that was great.
There's also something funny about just like a dog having an existential temper tantrum in like a gas station.
Yeah.
He's just a middle-aged guy.
He is.
I love that.
Yes, and then just some of the stuff that like develops as you think about again the implications of the world. Like it was so again so simple but so like perfect of like, oh yeah, of course. The fact that animals with opposable digits have like a special place in society because they're one of the few animals that can make all the human stuff work. It was really fascinating. You made me think about that when you were talking about like the limitations of Sandor being a dog. You know, that was really cool. Like just that simple but great kind of writing moment. Where?
Yeah, and that...
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I was just gonna say, and they're and the fact that because they're all different kinds of animals and different species, their limitations are all completely varied, and so they use each other in different ways. Like the one fucking deer who just holds grenades, and that's like his whole purpose. And then there's like the raccoon who does have thumbs, so he can fire a fucking crossbow.
Mm-hmm. And the koala that like went crazy because because its entire species can only eat one thing, and now because he came from like a zoo or something, he has no way to get it, and so he's like been eating tofu and apples and shit, and he's just going crazy because his body can't handle the food. You know, it's like it's getting some nutrients from the thing, but it's like literally like degrading his body, and he went crazy and betrayed the military and shit. That's fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where it's like it's not trying to be like in your face of asking all the realistic scientific questions. It's just using those existing limitations to create opportunities to tell more stories. And it's so fascinating because you could basically run this book forever of like what happens when girl and dog meet bird that thinks it's a dragon, or what happens when girl and dog run into an abandoned zoo eventually in the future or something. Like there's a lot you could do with just the sheer number of animals involved in this, and the way all of their relationships would evolve, where they would naturally have to have some kind of symbiotic relationship with each other. Something we didn't even get a chance to see in these first 8 issues that I imagine would be interesting to do later is like, what happens to natural predators? Like, what happens to a snake and a mongoose now that they can talk out their differences?
Well, I mean, I think that it's alluded to without being like directly informing the story itself, where Sandor says at some point, you think the Longtooths will sit around and wait for that? Of like the idea that predators, like full on, these animals are carnivores. They can only eat meat, are just like their own fucking faction. Within this new society, because the other animals can't trust them, and the humans can't trust them, and they can't trust either. You know, it's like, it's fucking great, man. So, like, some of the humans are like, okay, I guess we have to ally ourselves with the carnivores, because what the fuck else do you do? Like, they're the only other creatures that are going to be okay with eating meat.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like it, even just like the other kind of practicalities we're talking about, like, okay, the entire world decides to go vegan because they can't eat meat. But like, what happens to the people that can't have tofu? Like, where is the consideration for that? I used to know a guy in college who like wanted to be a vegetarian for ethical reasons his entire life, but he just can't do that. Like, it doesn't work for him biologically. So like, what happens to a person like that in this kind of world where they can't eat animals without it being actual murder?
Yep, no, absolutely. And it's like, one of the other things I really liked is the idea that just atrocities on all sides are just becoming a thing more and more, like, commonly. So, like, the fact that you have that goat character who you get this backstory of, he basically just walked into a genocide. And he talks about it. And he talks about it the exact same way you do, right? Like, he talks about it like it's fucking Selma or some shit, you know? Where he's like, I survived fucking Lincoln. I can't believe my brother went out like that. We were the only ones who got out of Lincoln. I'm like, holy shit, what the fuck is Lincoln? And then you get the revelation. It's like, they lured us in with the promise of peace and a new food source. And then they just slaughtered us in the goddamn street. Like, holy shit, man.
That backstory for that, what is he, a goat? Like, his backstory is so good, and that's part of why I think that's maybe the best issue of the series. So, is that it's built into this really well-paced story where all of the animals are talking about their different relationships with the concept of an afterlife, and they're having the conversation in a way like any group of humans would, whether they were theists, atheists, or agnostic. And then all of them trying to figure out some sort of meaning in this world, then gets paired with this one guy who survived something traumatic and can't find any meaning in it at all. And that being the culmination of like this arduous journey from the Anna military getting betrayed to the dragon bird thing, and the fact that they have at this point been injured or lost several friends along the way, and they are now in this position where, like, yeah, they do probably want to, on an existential level, just kind of ask these questions about, like, what happens when you die? Do animals have a soul? What is that like? And how would you justify that in the course of how animals are written about in things like the Bible? Like, all of that is really, really interesting, and I love that they actually stop to take the time and let all of them have a moment to decompress and really talk about what that would mean.
It's absolutely fucking fascinating. I also like just some of the world building stuff. So we kind of mentioned the world of Animosity backup, which I don't know. I talked about it. I'm like, I don't know how much we're really gonna say about it because it does kind of read like a Wikipedia article.
Yeah.
But
like character bios and stuff.
Yeah, but she did go out of her way to put a couple like interesting lore building things that you'll see later in there, and also the fucking funniest joke I've ever heard, like I've ever seen in a comic in a long time, which was North Dakota got like one line, and it was just about Mount Rushmore, of like a rather silly bit of graffiti that someone took way too much time on, considering that they're living in a goddamn apocalypse. And it's just got like this little thumbnail drawing of Mount Rushmore, but like all the heads are animal heads now. And it's like, no, that's just fucking canon. There's just someone came to Mount Rushmore, animal or human, and just recarved the entire thing to be animal faces in the middle of the apocalypse.
So much fucking effort, man. So much fucking effort.
Worth it.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of the fucking Futurama bit where Fry gets out of the time machine and sees the Statue of Liberty. It's like, they blew it up, you maniacs! And then the monkeys blew up their version too! And then the slug people, and then the whatever that is!
Oh
Just
my god.
consistently, the Statue of Liberty will always be destroyed. Will always be built in the image of its creators and then destroyed by those creators.
I did like that little map bit a lot. I had a lot of fun going through all of those states and seeing what the shit was going on. I really like the fact that District of Columbia just shows up as Bo, Sox, Barney, and Buddy couldn't be trusted. This pet couldn't be.
Yeah.
It was pretty fucking funny.
That was pretty good. I liked
the nuclear reactor thing in Missouri was pretty cool.
Yeah, I like that she went through the thought process of like, okay, what happens with, nuclear reactors and stuff. That was pretty good. I thought it was interesting that this is like a pretty consistent thread because she does it with a couple of the U.S. states, and then she does it as well when you get to Australia on the global scale, which is indigenous peoples actually have really good relationships. So like native reservations get to expand rapidly and form alliances with the new animal societies, and the same thing happened in Australia with Aboriginals. I'm like, yeah, I guess that kind of fucking tracks. That's interesting. That there's less. You didn't like that.
That's the one that made me feel like, oh, this is just white person trying to be like, haha, white people be crazy, and everyone else in the world probably doesn't have to deal with this. But I'm like, well, no, you track the history of any indigenous population on anywhere on the planet in the country, and I imagine it's going to be pretty close to what we do here. I thought that whole part was like, that doesn't seem like it's vying for the same kind of realism.
I don't know. I think it worked in a way. I can see where you're coming from, but I thought it just hit in a different way because it doesn't say that they're like bloodless or anything. It says that they just got along a lot better. And I thought that was interesting. I don't know.
I think that's a weird generalization to make, given the varieties of experiences everyone would have with their animal friends. That just seems like a massive overgeneralization. Like that's like saying the states with the least zoos had a better relationship than the rest of the country. I'm like, that might be true, but that's a very broad generalization to make when you don't know the specifics about any of this, especially because most of the countries they list have industrial societies pretty similar to America. Like South Africa is definitely not like in any way, shape, or form like a country that is less egregiously destroying its environment.
Yeah, and I think South Africa and Egypt actually go through some hard shit. There's like a number of countries and states even where like animals talking is a now crime punishable by death, and they've basically been re-enslaved to their original roles and stuff.
Yeah, so like I would like to see more of that like sort of global focus without just kind of like hand waving it there. I would like to see more of that actually explored and why it would be different for some places versus others. Because she went into a lot of detail with the US, and then I feel like the ones on the global map were just kind of dull and cherry picked.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense because the story is just taking place in America, so you kind of want to focus more on that. But yeah. South Africa. Humans in any form of power were expelled en masse from the country, some fleeing by plane and others by yacht, but as the animals burned large portions of the country to the ground and seized food caches to redistribute among those remaining. Humans willing to fight with the animals were spared and rewarded. Humans who fought for the leaders who were rejected were driven into the shallow water as gifts of alliance to the sharks.
Gifts of alliances to the sharks.
Yeah, so there's South Africa for you. I don't know. I thought it was, in the grand scheme of things, when you have like this, like Russia turned its animals back into slaves, and then you've got like some native populations were actually able to expand their territory and work with the animals. I'm like, I could buy it. It makes sense that like some groups of people would just have better luck than others based on the way that they treat and view animals, and just, you know, there's a certain level of how do you treat your own people, and then how much credit do you want to give to the newly sentient, I suppose. I don't know. I liked it better than you did, I guess. I'll take that. India didn't fare well, and that nor should it.
Although weirdly enough, it seemed like Pakistan got out of it all right, which is weird.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where the writer's political views start to play favorites. I don't know.
Although I will say, I'm flipping through it now. Mongolia, little has changed. It's pretty funny. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean, but it's funny.
I don't know. You know anybody from Mongolia? Any Mongolians watching this video want to comment on what your kinship with animal kind is like?
And then
I'm
fucking
curious.
New Zealand, guess.
Guess. Yeah, like again, there's like that humor to it. That's it's just got like a pretty good thing. It just fucking reminds me of reading like Bennett's Bombshells, and you got like vampire Batgirl Barbara Gordon fighting someone, and they're like fighting the Batgirls of Gotham City, where one of them broke their bat and is like, "You back off or I'll stake you through the heart." That kills vampires, right? Honey, who wouldn't that kill? It's just... it's always pretty good. I think that joke also got used in Hotel Transylvania 2, and I don't know which one came out first, but I'm going to assume it's Bombshells. Because I like Bennett more. Yeah.
Hotel Transylvania is funny, though.
It's alright. I like the joke with the invisible man and his invisible girlfriend. That was pretty fucking funny. Alright, finish your champagne, you two, and let's go. Alright, yeah, here we go. Oh, you spilled yours, you klutz.
Oh, good shit.
Yeah, okay.
That movie is directed by the guy who made Samurai Jack.
Yeah, I know, it's so weird.
Such a strange choice for him.
He also did a lot of Powerpuff Girls stuff, so I don't know what to tell you.
I mean, that's more in line with him.
Alright, so we've talked a lot about like the premise and the general thing. One thing we've kind of danced around mentioning is, I guess you could really call it the book's first like proper villain, right? Is the dragon, the vulture that spits acid.
Did you know that was a thing, by the way? Before reading this?
No, and I didn't actually take the time to look it up, so like how much embellishment did she do? Or is this like, no, that's just what those fuckers do. They just spit
Apparently
acid.
that is just what those fuckers do. Because the second I read that, I'm like, I have to look this up. Is this an actual bird? And sure enough, it's an actual bird.
I mean, like, what a pull for trying to find like this is just the bad guy of the animal kingdom, right? Like,
He's just a fucking bird dragon.
I don't know, that was interesting. Like, I'm okay. How fast does the acid work in real life?
Oh, I don't know,
like,
but I imagine nowhere near that fast.
Yeah, like there's just no way, right? But like, holy shit, that was... I was surprised and impressed by that poll. Like, I didn't look it up because I was willing to give her enough faith that it probably was a thing, and just kind of let her embellish it a little bit. But yeah, that was quite the turn of a creature into a villain, and the way in which it was, you know, it had its army of man beasts and beast men. I thought that was very surprising, and just, I don't know if like weird is the right word, but just strange and interesting, though maybe not as compelling as I think it needed to be. It is maybe a bit of a problem that in the second volume of the book, the thing you want to talk most about is the last issue of it, as opposed to the main story of the second volume.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that, like, the Vulture is a really cool visual, and it's a cool twist that it's not a dragon, it's just a bird that happens to work like a dragon. But all of the interesting stuff about the world and the premise continues on when you get to the last issue, and as far as that goes, it's really just kind of a placeholder for every issue needs some kind of action while we go and do other things that are more interesting. Because all the interesting things about that arc are in when the group separates. It's in the dog continuing to have his existential crisis. It's in the fact that she's starting to hallucinate her mom, and the idea that maybe she would still be alive somewhere. It's the religious stuff that comes in after they beat the Vulture, but none of that is really cemented in the bird itself. And the idea that his faction is just a bunch of people that are going to kill for meat is not particularly interesting on its own either. It's also
Well,
just
again,
not
it's not
particularly
just
scary.
people. It's not just people,
Animals
right?
too, yeah.
Animals and people working together, and it's like promised them meat, and it's just, it's very Mad Max, I guess, was kind of the vibe I got from it. And the thing that I think surprised me the most was he's promised meat to animals that don't even eat meat. It's kind of interesting as like the cult leader kind of vibe that came off of him.
Yeah, and the fact that there is sort of that sort of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, everyone's hanging by hooks in the barn, and the dog's trying really hard to like make her not look at the dead bodies when he gets her out. I liked all that stuff. I do wish though that there was more of like, I wish there was more of like a thematic conversation happening with what the birds faction had in any of this, because you do kind of go from a really strong, not villain, but like sympathetic antagonist with the wolf in the previous arc, to someone that was very much driven to this versus just what seems like a really evil bird.
I mean, I think, let's just be honest, all birds are evil.
I mean, this is true. All vultures, especially. I mean, you look at that thing and you know you can hunt that down to extinction.
Damn.
I gotta cancel my.
I gotta cancel my Amazon order. I really thought Steve would want a pet vulture that spits acid. We were talking about about Prometheus last week, and how much Steve likes the Ridley Scott stuff. I really thought acid spitting pet was really up on his list of wants, and apparently I got it all wrong.
I mean, I'm very impressed that you were able to find an acid spitting bird like that. That shows me you love. I will now return this and sick him on you, but thank you for thinking of me.
I don't know. Yeah, I do think though that there is a problem in that the dragon is probably the least interesting part of his namesake arc. But at the same time, it does have a bit of a draw, and I do kind of think about this. Fun. Yeah, I do kind of think about this in terms of like maybe if you'd read it when it was coming out, and you had like characters sitting there, no, it was a dragon, then that may have like hit just a little bit in like that different kind of way of like the keeping you guessing, like because someone even says we don't know what else woke up, like that maybe there are fucking dragons in this world now, which I think would just turn the book into a much different thing and probably wouldn't be as interesting. So I do like the revelation of what it actually is kind of satisfying in that way too. I don't know. Yeah,
I had the same thought of like, wait, are we actually about to say now that everything's awake, maybe dragons really did exist and they just happen to be sentient now? I'm like, oh, no, it's just a bird. Never mind. I was completely off base.
Yeah, or, it could have been like, oh, dragons waking is what made all the animals come to life kind of thing. I don't know. It was interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely a direction to take it. And the other thing about this book, like, putting it in context with other creators' own stuff at the time, like there are like these very clear like patterns the industry will follow. So like everyone for a while was doing nothing but epic fantasy stuff. Like Game of Thrones got big, and when it wrapped up, every creator-owned comic that anyone was writing is just hardcore sword and sorcery fantasy. This one falls in line with the trend like right before that, where everyone was just trying to cash in on the fact that The Walking Dead was a really big success. And so the fact that you get this spin on the same audience, because I think you could give this to someone who likes The Walking Dead, especially the second arc. But the fact that they're trying to cash in on the same audience, but they have a much more unique into it, makes it work. So like you could read a dozen arcs in The Walking Dead that are just the bird vulture thing. Like that's the whole book. The whole book is just wander through forest, hear rumors of some monstrous thing that is inhumane, fight that thing in a horror movie ripoff, and then kill it and move on to the next forest. Like that's that whole fucking book. So doing that in this book, where it's animals, inherently makes that boring premise more interesting. So I'll give it that.
Here's a question, because this was brought up in the first volume that there were scientists who like were pretty sure they knew why the wake happened and stuff, right? Do you think this will be like The Walking Dead, where we'll never actually get an explanation for what the fuck happened? Or do you think that would ever be revealed in the way that this story develops? And I don't know if it finished, if it ever will finish, or what. But yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say given like the fact that we've only read the first two arcs, and they only got introduced at the end of the first one. But I, for my personal taste at least, I would prefer if they kept it this way, where they just never explain it, because the idea that they have now gained sentience is a lot more interesting to figure out what to do with the world than trying to figure out why it happened. The only reason I would want them to go back and talk about why it happened is if it's the final arc and they're debating whether or not they should reverse it. Anything in between of like trying to come up with science mumbo jumbo to justify it wouldn't really do anything for the book, aside from just reiterate the premise, which is already interesting.
I tend to agree. I was just curious. It's, I don't know, fucking science fiction mumbo jumbo. There's just a lot of discussion on the level of impossibility of what the premise of the book is something that I found fascinating, so I'd be curious to see if it is explored more in depth. Because they talk about it directly, but it's like, it's not just that all animals on Earth suddenly gain the ability to think, and that they think at the level at which their lifespan mirrors humanity. But it's also that creatures without vocal cords can now speak.
Yeah.
So what has happened?
Well, and the way that it is kind of selective about that, right? So like creatures without vocal cords can speak, but animals who have very specific dietary restrictions stay the same. Like, it's interesting how you can alter one aspect of their physiology to make the premise work, but not another. And so drawing attention to that is a very weird choice.
I don't know, I think that it does make sense, because it's like, it's speculating on the origins of the thing. It's like, nothing else about any of the animals got changed. It's just that they all gained human-level sentience and the ability to talk. That's it. Everything else about them, they are still 100% them. Like, the horses don't start walking on their hind legs or anything. The animals still function physically like animals. Sandor doesn't suddenly get to live longer than a purebred bloodhound would. He's still gonna die. Like, all the physical things about animals are the same, except that they now have the ability to speak. And that's just, what the fuck?
Yeah. And I mean, it's just enticing enough where, like, every arc I do kind of want to keep following and just be like, whoa, what other parts of this world can we explore with this cast of characters? The expanded cast I don't find as interesting as just the dog and the little girl. Everyone else like has their moments. Like the goat has his moment, which is fun. That one animal that like grew up on high altitudes, and so he's not exposed to different kinds of bacteria. So he's trying really hard to compensate for that now that he is running around in the forest and stuff. That's an interesting idea. But I am kind of just here for Lone Wolf and Cub. dynamic of the dog and the girl for the most part.
Yeah. So it was interesting to see that the whole premise of the book is to get from New York to California to get her to her half-brother who doesn't even know her. And, you're kind of interested to see what that would develop into. But also you get, like, a preview of what that guy's life is now like. In the Rise backup from the first volume. And I thought it was interesting to kind of see that they're exploring what humanity's new role is in various levels. That it's not just a us versus them thing, that like some pockets have completely different dynamics with animals and humans than other pockets. And so San Francisco is the one city that was mostly a peaceful transition but is firmly in animal control with humans still around. And so you get the sense of like this guy, is a veterinarian, so they need to keep him alive, and they're happy to do so, but they still they don't fucking trust him. This is interesting.
Yeah, I mean the tension in that first issue is really interesting in general. I wish wish all of them were included together, because it seems like it is all just one self-contained story. So maybe going back at some point and reviewing that on its own would be fun. But it was a really interesting premise, and I liked getting a chance to see what exactly she's going to be walking into. Because I imagine if they included this issue alongside the first two volumes, then these two storylines are going to meet up very soon, I would.
Yeah. I mean, it's just interesting because you normally wouldn't get something like that, That would be maybe a later reveal in a later volume of the first book, but to get it as its own, like, okay, the brother is alive. You don't have to worry about that, like, or we're not going to do that revelation where they get all this way and then they can't find him and he's dead. The brother is alive.
And also
and
that, like you said, he doesn't know that she exists, and so like his entire relationship and focus with the animals is completely divorced from what we've been seeing so far.
I don't know. It's a good premise. It's a good premise. I liked that issue. That fucking last page where it's like the wolf wants, cybernetic arms and shit was kind of cool.
The bat in the closet is the creepiest motherfucking thing of all time.
You don't want a bat babysitter? You don't want a 3 foot long bat to just chill in your fucking cupboard and watch you sleep?
I have seen pictures of those things before. Like in real life, there are bats that are just like 3 feet long that hang around place. I'm like, that's the most terrifying shit I have ever seen.
See, Haley calls them sky puppies.
I mean, bats in general are sky puppies. 3 feet long bats. Those are more like sky death.
Bats don't even do anything. They're like the most harmless fucking critters ever.
I mean, you're correct. Have you ever seen that Robert Pattinson interview? There's this really fucking funny interview. Because like actors will always like talk about like whenever they play superheroes, they try to get into the mind of the character and stuff. So Robert Pattinson's like, so I was gonna play Batman, so I decided to look up videos of like how bats fight to see if like I could use that. And like I saw a video on YouTube of a bat who like was trying to fight a chicken, so he just kept like screaming at it and moving around in circles, and then eventually when the chicken got bored enough, he bit it in the ass. And I'm like, Matt, can we use this?
I just want to see Batman bite someone in the ass.
Oh my god, it's so fucking funny.
Oh man, that's pretty good. Oh, I don't know. We haven't talked much about the art. You mentioned that you really didn't like the coloring. I think you did kind of hit a nail on the head on that one. I hadn't really been able to quite put my finger on why a lot of the art didn't quite hit as well for me, but I think that you definitely nailed it on that one. beyond
compare that, like, compare the Rise, right? Like, compare the color choices in that to just the regular book, and you're like, oh wow, this person's got like a full palette, and he's using all of these different colors in all different ways and conveying all these interesting moods. And then you go back to the Rise, and it's just like, if I went to a bookstore and looked up how to draw comics as a book, that would be the cover art, just flat and inoffensive.
Yeah, again, I'm not like, I don't think it's terrible, but it is definitely like, yeah, it's less. It feels more phoned in, I suppose, might be the best way to describe it. The thing I want to just like give credit for, I mean, it might sound a little condescending, but I did see the artist talk about this. Of just as an artist, that is a really big fucking challenge when you realize how many types of animals are in this story.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that he has to not only draw all of them, but multiple times in multiple scenes showing multiple different types of emotions. That is really impressive on an artistic level.
Well, and artists always talk about how, like, drawing animals is one of the hardest things you can do in a mental story, and so pitching an entire book as nothing but animals, like, anyone who says yes to that has a death wish.
Yeah, because I remember, like, I commissioned Alfie to draw a thing of Jumpa for a gift for Haley, commission for Haley as Wonder Woman with Leah, and they were writing Jumpa, and I was like, so did you have a fun time drawing? It was like, I had to look up and try to figure out not only how to draw a kangaroo, but to draw a giant kangaroo that looked cool with battle armor. And it was so weird. I'm like, yeah, I guess I didn't really think about that, but yeah, artists study human anatomy and learn how to draw humans. And then it's just, yeah, now do completely different fucking type of anatomy. Have fun, bye. Is really like that's a lot.
Well, and like all of like the traditional tools you would use to kind of assist you in drawing. So like you don't have every available animal in the world as a mannequin you can just buy and pose. Most digital suites don't come with built-in brushes or 3D models for that would match animals. And so like if you're a digital artist, you have to go out of way to buy those. If you're trying to use the internet looking up reference photos, like good luck trying to find reference photos for dog fights tiger, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things where it's like you have to kind of like find the 2 or 3 very basic bits of information as reference and then just try your best to match it based on what the scene requires. And it takes a lot more effort and patience than with humans, where like if I need to understand how Batman is standing to punch someone, I'll just stand that way and take a photo. It's not very hard, but I can't go to the jungle and get a dragon vulture.
Yeah, I mean, man, I hope this guy lives near a zoo and has a season fucking pass, man. Like,
and
not
then,
only
like,
a zoo, like a really well-stocked zoo.
And then yeah, like that's the other thing is like a lot of art is also understanding how natural objects move. And so like you study the way people's clothes fold on their bodies, how shadows cast and stuff. All of that gets thrown out the window when you have to do it with a fucking animal that you're never going to see in that context.
One thing I was maybe a little bit disappointed with, because we don't get a lot of it. There's a little bit with the Animilitary, but it's mentioned more in that World of Animosity on the art thing of as the society continues to develop, animals begin to wear more clothing and jewelry and stuff to express their individual identities more. And I was like, and I really kind of wish we'd see more of that. We get a little bit of it, you know, when we see the Animilitary, you see like the koala has like a fucking headband on and shit, and there's the goat character we were talking about earlier. He's wearing the jacket of his former owner. But a lot of the other animals, you don't start to see that fashion thing. You just kind of see, like the Animilitary is mostly just battle accessories with the fucking tortoises with rocket launchers on their back. Which, by the way, fucking awesome.
That was pretty fucking.
Yeah, but no, it is a little disappointing that you don't get to see more of the art of the animals with more clothing and more self expression. That it is still just a lot of essentially naked animals now.
Well, and also like in the situations where the animals and humans are working together or living in harmony, you think they would have like had some kind of situation where they are benefiting from each other. So like the animals start to wear clothes or jewelry, and the humans maybe wear less so or something. But that's never really brought up. They're still kind of behaving exactly like humans and animals would independently.
Yeah, and again, I think it's more based on the premise of we're seeing the characters moving through the world, and so we maybe don't want to show them being too different because they're our POV character. But like, I think you do get a little bit of it, I guess, in the dragon, where you've got the people dressed as in animal skins and the animals dressed up to look like people, kind of thing. You get a
The
little bit of that
multiple
going on.
animals in a suit pretending to be a person is the funniest thing ever. It's so fucking funny.
Yeah, let's see here. I just got to that panel. So that was a snake, two cranes, another snake. I think that's a squirrel, two frogs, and a skunk. That's what the fake humans were.
Incredible. 10 out of 10.
Some of these alternate covers are just fucking hysterical, and I love it.
It's also pretty funny too, where like I was looking at the covers for the issues as I was reading it, and every time I opened the new issue and I saw a cover, I'm like, oh, do we jump forward and age her up a little bit here? And then no, we don't. Like it's just the cover art seems to draw her a lot older than the book does.
That's a problem you run into a lot, I think.
Yeah, especially when it's not the artist of the book doing the cover.
Mm-hmm. And again, she's like, what is she supposed to be, 12 here since she's getting her period? Like 12 or 13 or something like that.
Yeah, her age is in the World of Animosity thing somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe if I'd read the fucking every bit in detail of the Wikipedia, I would remember these things, but I don't. She's 11. Okay, so she's, man, that's young. That would suck. She got that shit early, poor girl. Some girls wait until they're like 14 before it happens. This fucking girl 11, that's awful. That's 3 extra years of bullshit, man. I feel bad for her.
Oh man, that's gonna make for some really interesting developments as the series goes on if she's just 11.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I was just flipping through trying to see if there are more instances of the animals wearing human clothes, and nah, it doesn't. It's something that's talked about, but it's not something you see very often. Which you think just as an artist, you'd maybe like embrace a little bit more. It's like, oh, thank God, I've got to draw less of this thing now.
Maybe it's worse though. Maybe it's like, what's harder than drawing a tiger? A tiger that's wearing a t-shirt.
Fair. I don't know what they wear. T-shirts? Would they wear
That's a good question.
skirts? Like would you have to invent new garments for that? Because like one of the things that's mentioned is a lot of the birds. Like there's a bird nation now in, I think it was Wyoming, and so it's like, and they all wear a lot of like they immediately all started adopting clothing, and I'm like, how the fuck does a bird wear anything? Because
given that like they have
think
to
about like
flap
wind
their
resistance and shit, yeah, and like flapping wings, like vests.
Do you think
I
they'll
don't know.
start like inventing jewelry specifically for animal appendages?
I mean, you'd have to, right?
Like, what does a ring look like if it's for a hoof?
I don't know. Like a cuff, like a Wonder Woman cuff kind of thing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
very strange.
It's interesting. It's one of those moments where I feel like the imagination of the writer maybe exceeds what's like able to be conveyed by the artist to a certain degree. Because again, the level of reference here, and then the idea of trying to put clothes on some of that stuff is like, oh, what the fuck.
There is also a part of it where I'm like, I think she may have just invented the coolest idea for a tabletop RPG, and I'd rather just play that than read the rest of it. Like, let me DM this. I got this. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah, no, I could see it. Because you could have like your party and like half of them are humans and half of them are animals.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a fun idea. Someone should go talk to Margaret Bennett about turning this into a tabletop RPG.
I'm sure she'd be into that. Someone kickstart this.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty. I think I'm about all strapped out on stuff I wanted to talk about with this. I think we kind of covered the gambit. Probably went too in detail on some of the things. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe we forgot to talk about somebody's favorite moment. But hey, if we did, guess what? You can leave a comment telling us your favorite moment. We can discuss it with you.
If we divided up the amount of comments we got on the Prometheus video between like the last month of content, I would be very satisfied. Because what the fuck, man? You can't talk about that movie even now.
Nah, man. What it is I've got that one guy that's been following me for years, and I appreciate the devotion. I truly do. That just fucking loves the Alien movies and like has a weird love for Alien 3 in particular. So anytime, I always know it's gonna happen. Anytime Alien or Predator comes up, I know I'm gonna get a fucking comment from him, and somehow or other it's gonna work its way into talking about Alien 3.
There was one of those comments where, like, because they're timestamped, I read that and I listened to my bit in the audio. I'm like, I didn't even say that. What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, he just really likes Alien.
Dang.
It's okay. I appreciate the devotion. It's just funny. I feel like I've got a relationship with him, like more so than I think any YouTuber has with someone that just comments on their videos. Like there's a real kinship there now. Anyway, what do we want to give a score to Animosity?
I'll go ahead and give it 4 out of 5 traitorous koalas.
Okay. I think I'm right there with you. I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 pandas that immediately commit suicide upon gaining sentience.
That's a good one.
That was fucking dark, man. I couldn't believe she went there with that one. The fucking, the virgin Tom Taylor. No, I'll never hurt another animal in a comic again because my son got mad at me when I killed Crypto. The Chad Margaret Bennett. The pandas are gonna kill themselves.
Oh my god, that was so fucking good.
I wasn't ready for it, I gotta be honest with you.
No, I forgot it happened until you just said it.
Very dark humor. So if you did enjoy this, I will say the other really good Margaret Bennett horror story that exists is Insects. It's pronounced like insects, like bugs, but spelled Insexts. I highly recommend that one. That was a really, really good horror comic that just... If you like horror and you like lesbians and you like body horror in particular, that's going to check a lot of good boxes for you. So, go check
in the first half.
You don't like body horror?
No, I like body horror. But
oh, you don't like lesbians. Got it.
No, I was like, horror, I love it. Lesbians, I love it. Body horror with lesbians. I'm like, I don't know. What kind of horrifying bodies are we talking about?
Well, I mean, I guess spoilers. There's Mpreg and people turning into butterflies.
Oh, that's
but not like, oh, lovely, it's a cloud of butter. No, like human-sized butterfly monster. So chew on that one for a bit.
God, I'm intrigued. I'm sickened but curious.
It's a good book. But yeah. Alright, I think that's going to do it for this week. Alfie feels bad about having missed a couple episodes now. So I asked him what he wanted to talk about next week, and he said he wanted to do a ranking of the live-action Batman movies and just talk about them. So I don't think I'm going to go through and rewatch them, but I'll definitely be curious to talk about like where we put them. I'm not sure format-wise how we're going to go about ranking them because I really don't want to talk about the same movie like 3 fucking times because we all have it at different spots. So I think what we might do is just we'll have the list of live-action Batman movies, and then we'll say, this is where I rank this on the list. I put it at number X, and then we'll just talk about that movie for a bit. I think that might work.
And I imagine also stipulating we're only talking about the live-action ones, because I'm not going to sit here and start talking minutia about every voice actor who's ever been Batman.
No, correct. He did specifically say live-action, and I do think it's fine to limit that. I'll do one addendum to his topic though, since you mentioned that, and I do think it would be fun. We can each bring one animated choice but it has to be a movie and not a show.
A movie, not a show. Okay, yeah, I mean, we can make that work. I mean, I could solve this problem really easily right now as far as ranking goes. Number 2, everyone. Number 1, Robert Pattinson.
No, he's not talking about the live-action Batman. We're talking about the live-action Batman movies. So yeah. It's not just Christian Bale. It's like, where do you rank Rises, Dark Knight, and Batman Begins specifically?
Yeah. So number 2, everything. Number 1, Robert Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson is not a Batman movie. And you're being purposely confusing by saying that. And
every Batman movie has some good qualities and has some bad qualities, and it makes it number 2. And then the best Batman movie is the one with Robert Pattinson.
Okay, well, spoilers for where Steve ranks it. Alrighty. Well, everyone, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I am very confused.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen, and we will be discussing things with our new animal co-host,